She approached him with $20 clutched tight and a simple request that would change everything. The girl didn't know the man on that park bench, wearing faded jeans and an old jacket, was Marcus Crawford, a billionaire whose name graced towers across the city. She didn't know he'd lost his daughter 5 years ago. That grief had gutted him completely. She didn't know he'd been hiding from his mansion, desperately searching for something real, something that made him feel alive. And Marcus didn't know this small girl with brave eyes and a worn backpack, asking him to be her father for one day, was about to give him the greatest gift he'd stopped believing in, a second chance at fatherhood. At love. Before I continue the story, please subscribe. I need to reach 1,000 subscribers so I can keep bringing you stories like this every day. It's just one click for you, but it means a lot to me. Thank you. Marcus Crawford owned half the skyline but couldn't buy back a single heartbeat. His penthouse suite overlooked the city like a glass throne, 20 stories of marble and mahogany that echoed with silence, a monument to everything money could purchase and nothing it couldn't. 5 years ago, on a rain-slicked highway, a drunk driver had stolen his entire world in seconds. His wife Sarah and his 7-year-old daughter Emma gone before the ambulance arrived, before he could say goodbye, before he could tell Emma one more time that she was his whole heart. The therapy sessions blurred together. 52 weeks of nodding while doctors used words like processing and healing and moving forward, as if grief had a schedule, as if a father could simply decide to stop missing his daughter's laugh. His company, Crawford Industries, ran itself now. Executives making decisions he approved with mechanical nods. Board meetings he attended like a ghost. Present, but not living. Breathing, but not alive. The mansion felt like a mausoleum. Every room a reminder. Emma's bedroom untouched, her toys waiting for hands that would never hold them, her books waiting for eyes that would never read them. So, Marcus started disappearing, trading his $1,000 suits for thrift store jeans and faded jackets, walking among the forgotten, the homeless, the hungry, sitting in soup kitchens where nobody knew his name or cared about his fortune. Here, in the raw edges of the city, he felt something close to real, close to human. Today marked 5 years since the accident, and Marcus sat on a bench in Riverside Park, watching fathers push daughters on swings, listening to children's laughter cut through him like glass. He tortured himself this way every year. Punishment and pilgrimage combined. Remembering Emma's small hand in his, her voice calling him Daddy, the weight of her head on his shoulder during bedtime stories. The afternoon sun filtered through oak trees, and Marcus closed his eyes, wondering if grief ever truly ended or if it just became the air you breathed. Invisible, but constant, the price of having loved someone completely. Lily Henderson had learned early that hope was dangerous, that wanting things only made their absence hurt worse. She was 8 years old and had lived at Street, Mary's home for children, for 3 years, ever since cancer had slowly, cruelly stolen her mother away, leaving Lily with memories that grew hazier each month, a voice she couldn't quite recall, a face that blurred like watercolors in rain. The orphanage wasn't terrible. Sister Margaret was kind in her stern way. The meals were adequate, the beds were clean, but it was institutional, temporary. A place for children nobody had claimed, and Lily felt that truth in her bones every single day. She was bright, her teachers said so, reading 2 grades above her level, solving math problems that made other kids groan. But intelligence couldn't fill the hole where a family should be. Tomorrow was the father-daughter dance at Lincoln Elementary. And for 3 weeks, Lily had listened to her classmates chatter about their dresses, their corsages, their dads, watched them practice dance steps in the hallway, seen their excitement build like a wave she'd never ride. She'd decided weeks ago she wouldn't go, wouldn't stand alone while everyone else twirled in their father's arms, wouldn't endure the pitying looks or worse, the carefully averted eyes. But this morning, lying in her narrow bed at Street Mary's, listening to her roommate Sophie breathe softly in sleep, an idea had seized Lily with desperate clarity. She had $20, 3 years of saved allowance from doing extra chores, folding laundry, helping in the kitchen, small coins accumulated with patient discipline. $20 couldn't buy a real father, couldn't resurrect her mother, couldn't change her circumstances, but maybe, just maybe, it could buy a few hours of pretending, of not being the girl without, of belonging for one evening. It was crazy, probably impossible, definitely risky, but Lily had inherited her mother's courage along with her brown eyes, and she'd rather try and fail than spend another night wondering what if, regretting her own fear. Lily saw him from across the park, alone on a bench, wearing clothes that looked soft and worn like her own, his face carrying the kind of sadness she recognized from her own mirror. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she walked toward him, the $20 bill damp in her clenched fist, her courage threatening to abandon her with every step. She stopped 3 feet away, and when he looked up, his eyes were kind, but distant. The eyes of someone who'd traveled very far inside himself and wasn't sure how to come back. The words tumbled out before she could lose her nerve. "Sir, I know this sounds strange, but I have $20, and there's a dance tomorrow. A father-daughter dance at my school, and I don't have a father, and I was wondering if maybe you could pretend to be my dad for just a few hours, just for the dance. I promise I won't be any trouble." Marcus stared at this small girl with her earnest face and threadbare jacket, and time collapsed, folding in on itself until he was back in Lincoln Elementary's gymnasium 5 years ago. Emma standing on his shoes while they swayed to music, her giggling filling his chest with a warmth he'd never feel again. The resemblance wasn't physical. Emma had been blonde where this girl was brunette. But the courage, the vulnerability, the desperate hope in her eyes, that was pure Emma. His first instinct was to refuse, to stand up and walk away before this child's need could crack open the carefully maintained distance between himself and the world of fathers and daughters, between himself and the agony of remembering. But something stopped him. Maybe the $20 bill she held like a treasure. Maybe the way she stood so straight despite her fear. Maybe the simple fact that she'd chosen him out of everyone in this park, seen something in him worth asking. "What's your name?" he heard himself ask, his voice rusty from disuse. "Lily," she whispered. "Lily Henderson. Are you sure about this, Lily? Are you sure this is safe? That this is what you want?" She nodded, her jaw set with determination that belonged on someone much older. Marcus reached out slowly and took the crumpled $20 bill. Felt its weight. Felt the weight of what she was entrusting him with. "Okay," he said softly. "Okay, Lily. I'll be your dad for the dance." Marcus felt responsibility settle over him like a cloak, heavy and immediate. "Where do you live, Lily? Does anyone know you're here? Is it safe for you to be out alone in the park?" She shifted her weight from foot to foot, and he saw the truth before she spoke it. "I live at Street Mary's Home for Children," she admitted quietly. "I snuck out this afternoon, but I'll be back before dinner. They won't notice I was gone." Marcus's concern sharpened. This brave girl wandering the city alone, approaching strangers with her desperate plan. But beneath the worry, he felt something else. Admiration for her resourcefulness, her courage, the kind of independence born from having no one to depend on but yourself. He should tell her to go back, should walk her there himself. But instead he asked, "What exactly does this dance involve? What would I need to do?" Lily's face brightened, relief washing over her features like sunrise. "It's tomorrow at 6 in the evening at Lincoln Elementary School. You'd need to wear something nice. Not fancy, but like dress clothes, and then we'd go into the gymnasium, and there's music, and we'd dance together. And there are cookies and punch, and at the end, they take a photo of all the fathers and daughters." Her voice grew softer as she described it, as if speaking the details aloud made them more real, more possible. "That's all. Just a few hours. Just pretending." But Marcus heard what she didn't say. Heard that this simple evening meant everything. Meant belonging. Meant not being different. Meant having what every other girl took for granted. "Simple," he repeated, and nodded slowly. "I can do that." Lily's smile could have lit the darkest room. "Meet me at the school entrance at 5:45 tomorrow evening," he said. "Lincoln Elementary, you said?" She nodded eagerly. "I'll be there, I promise. I'm always early." Marcus extended his hand, formal and solemn, and Lily shook it with surprising firmness, her small fingers wrapping around his, sealing a deal that felt far more sacred than any contract he'd ever signed. A promise between two people who understood what it meant to need something you couldn't buy. That evening, Marcus sat in his study surrounded by leather-bound books and mahogany furniture that cost more than most people earned in years, and stared at the crumpled $20 bill on his desk. Under the amber glow of his lamp, it looked almost sacred. This offering from a child who had so little but was willing to give everything for a few hours of belonging. He thought about Emma, about the 3 father-daughter dances they'd attended before the universe ripped her away, remembered how she'd insist on standing on his shoes so she could reach, her small arms wrapped around his waist, her laughter bubbling up as they swayed off rhythm to whatever song played. The memory didn't hurt less after 5 years. It just hurt differently. A dull ache instead of a screaming wound. Background radiation instead of an explosion. Mrs. Chen found him there an hour later, his housekeeper of 20 years, who'd watched him crumble and never left. Who'd known Emma from birth and grieved her like a grandmother. "Mr. Crawford," she said softly, using the formal address she'd never dropped despite his protests. "You seem different tonight." Marcus looked up and realized it was true. Something had shifted. Some small part of him had woken up after years of sleepwalking through existence. He told her about Lily, about the $20, about the dance tomorrow, and watched tears gather in Mrs. Chen's weathered eyes. She sat down across from him. A liberty she rarely took, and said with absolute certainty, "Emma would want you to do this. She would want you to help that little girl. You know she would." Marcus felt the truth of it settle in his chest. His daughter had inherited his wife's enormous heart, had cried over injured birds and shared her lunch with kids who'd forgotten theirs, and she would absolutely want him to show up for Lily. But more than that, he wanted to show up, wanted to do more than just fulfill the bare minimum of their agreement. He would make this night special, would give Lily the kind of evening Emma had loved. But he'd have to be careful. Couldn't arrive in his chauffeured Mercedes or wear his $5,000 suit, couldn't overwhelm this child with wealth she couldn't fathom. He'd just be present, attentive, kind. A father for an evening, and maybe in being that for her, he'd remember how to be human again. Lily slipped back through Street Mary's side door at 5:45, her heart hammering with a cocktail of excitement and terror that made her feel dizzy. The halls smelled like industrial cleaner and boiled vegetables, familiar and institutional, but tonight even that couldn't dampen the hope burning in her chest. What if he doesn't show up? The thought whispered poison in her mind. What if he was just being nice? What if he forgets? What if tomorrow at 5:45 she stands alone at the school entrance while other girls arrive with their real fathers? She pushed the fear down and headed to her room, where Sophie was lying on her bed reading a tattered copy of Anne of Green Gables. Sophie looked up and immediately noticed something different. Lily practically glowed, her eyes bright with barely contained joy. "What happened to you?" Sophie demanded. Sitting up, Lily couldn't keep it inside, couldn't bear the weight of her secret alone. So she told Sophie everything. The man in the park, the $20, the dance tomorrow. Sophie's face shifted from surprise to alarm. "Lily, that's crazy. What if he's dangerous? What if he's some kind of predator? What if he doesn't show up and you're heartbroken? What if he does show up and something bad happens?" Lily shook her head firmly. "I know it sounds crazy, but he's not dangerous." "Soph," I could see it in his eyes. He was sad. So sad. Like he's lost someone important. But he was kind, gentle. "I can't explain it, but I know he's good." Sophie wanted to argue, but saw the certainty in her friend's face, the kind of bone-deep knowing that couldn't be reasoned away. That night, Lily lay in her narrow bed, staring at the ceiling. Sleep impossible. Her mind rehearsing conversations she'd have tomorrow, practicing how she'd introduce him to Jennifer who'd teased her about being an orphan. Imagining how it would feel to finally belong, to be just like the other girls, to have a father, even if only for a few precious hours. Marcus stood in his walk-in closet that afternoon, A room larger than most apartments, lined with suits that cost more than some people's cars. Italian silk and English wool organized by color and season, a monument to wealth that suddenly felt obscene. He bypassed the Armani, the Tom Ford, the custom-tailored pieces that announced his status with every stitch, and chose instead a simple charcoal suit he'd bought years ago for a charity event where he wanted to blend in, modest and clean but unremarkable. The kind of suit a middle manager might wear to a wedding. He paired it with a plain white shirt and a subdued blue tie, checking himself in the mirror and seeing not Marcus Crawford, billionaire, but just Marcus, a man preparing to take a little girl to a dance. He had his driver, Thomas, take him to a small florist shop across town, where he selected a delicate wrist corsage with white roses and baby's breath, something Emma had always loved, the tradition of father presenting daughter with flowers before a dance. As the afternoon stretched toward evening, Marcus felt something unfamiliar stirring in his chest. Anticipation, nervousness, the feeling of mattering to someone, of being needed, of having a responsibility that actually meant something beyond quarterly earnings and stock prices. At 5:30, he dismissed Thomas and caught a regular taxi, giving the driver Lincoln Elementary's address, watching the city roll past while his heart beat faster than it had in 5 years. The school appeared, a modest brick building with a parking lot filling with cars, and Marcus paid the driver and stood on the sidewalk, watching fathers emerge with their daughters, little girls in pretty dresses clutching their fathers' hands, and the sight was a knife and a balm simultaneously, breaking his heart with memories of Emma, while healing something long dormant with the possibility of Lily. He checked his watch, 5:40, and walked toward the entrance, the corsage box held carefully in his hands, feeling more alive and more terrified than he'd felt since the night they'd told him Emma and Sarah were gone. Lily had been standing by the school entrance since 5:40, 10 minutes early, because waiting in her room at Street Mary's had become unbearable, every minute stretching like taffy, her nerves making it impossible to sit still. She wore her best dress, a simple blue cotton dress from the donation bin that Sister Margaret had helped her alter so it fit properly, taking in the waist and hemming the bottom with careful, loving stitches. Her hair was braided in 2 neat plaits that she'd practiced 3 times before getting right, and her shoes, her only pair of black flats, were polished until they reflected the evening light. She felt pretty, or as pretty as an orphan with second-hand clothes could feel, but more than that, she felt exposed, vulnerable, standing alone while other fathers and daughters streamed past her into the building. 5:45 arrived and Marcus didn't. Her heart began its descent, that familiar sinking feeling she knew too well, the feeling of disappointment, of being forgotten, of not mattering enough for someone to remember. 5:50 came, and tears prickled behind her eyes. Of course he wasn't coming. How could she have been so stupid, so naive? Nobody kept promises to orphans. Nobody cared. Then she saw him, walking up the path with purpose, holding a small, clear plastic container. And her heart didn't just lift. It soared. Marcus reached her slightly out of breath and immediately apologized. "I'm so sorry, Lily. Traffic was terrible. I should have left earlier." But Lily didn't care about the lateness. Didn't care about anything, except that he came. He actually came. He kept his word. Her face transformed, joy wiping away fear like sunlight burning through fog. Marcus opened the plastic container and removed a delicate corsage of white roses. "May I?" he asked softly, and Lily nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. He gently pinned it to her dress, his fingers careful and practiced. And when Lily looked down at the flowers on her wrist, real flowers, beautiful flowers, flowers just for her, she thought she might cry right there on the school steps. She'd never had a corsage before, had only seen them on other girls, and now she had one too. Now she was like everyone else. Now she was special. They entered the gymnasium together, Lily's hand small and warm in Marcus's, and he felt the weight of what she'd entrusted him with, the sacred responsibility of not disappointing this child who'd risked everything on a stranger's kindness. The gym had been transformed with blue and silver streamers cascading from the ceiling. Balloons clustered in corners, a makeshift dance floor marked with tape and a table laden with cookies and punch. Music played softly from speakers, something gentle and sweet, and fathers and daughters filled the space, some swaying together on the dance floor, some standing in clusters talking, some posed by a backdrop for photos. Lily's grip on his hand tightened when a girl with perfect blonde curls and an expensive pink dress stared at them, her mouth forming a small O of surprise. "That's Jennifer," Lily whispered, and Marcus understood immediately. This was the girl who'd made Lily feel small, who'd teased her about being an orphan, who'd made her dread this night. Marcus squeezed Lily's hand reassuringly as Jennifer approached with her father. "This is my dad," Lily said, her voice steady despite her nervousness. "This is Marcus." Marcus extended his free hand to Jennifer's father, shook firmly, made small talk about the decorations and the music, slipped effortlessly into the role he'd played at 1,000 business functions and charity galas. The schmoozing, the polite conversation, the ability to make anyone feel comfortable. But this was different. This mattered in a way board meetings and investor calls never had, because he could see how Lily transformed beside him, how she stood taller, how her shoulders squared with pride, how she glowed when teachers came over to say hello. And Marcus introduced himself naturally, comfortably, as if he belonged here, as if being Lily's father for the night was the most normal thing in the world. A teacher mentioned what a lovely daughter he had, and Marcus felt his throat tighten but managed to smile and say, "Thank you. She's remarkable." And he meant it with every fiber of his being. Watching Lily's face as other girls looked at her with new eyes, no longer the orphan but just another girl with her dad, Marcus realized with absolute certainty that he would move heaven and earth to protect this moment for her, would fight anything that tried to diminish her joy. The music shifted to something slow and sweet, a piano melody that tugged at hearts. And Marcus led Lily onto the dance floor, where other fathers and daughters already swayed together. Lily's nervousness showed in her rigid shoulders, her uncertain steps, and she whispered up at him that she didn't know how to dance, had never learned, would probably mess it up. Marcus bent down slightly so she could hear him over the music. "It's easy," he promised. "Just follow my lead. There's no wrong way to do this." He took her small hands in his, positioned them gently, and they began to sway. Nothing fancy, just side to side, finding a rhythm together. Lily stepped on his foot and immediately gasped an apology, her face flushing with embarrassment. But Marcus just smiled, a real smile that felt foreign on his face after so many years. "Emma used to do the same thing," he said without thinking, the words escaping before he could cage them. The moment stretched as Lily processed the name. The past tense, the shadow that crossed Marcus's face. "Who's Emma?" she asked softly, and Marcus felt his carefully constructed walls crack. "She was my daughter," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "She would have been about your age now, maybe a little younger, but she's gone. She died 5 years ago." The words hung between them, heavy with grief, and Lily didn't flinch away from them, didn't offer empty platitudes or change the subject. Instead, her eyes filled with recognition and understanding, because she knew loss intimately, had felt it hollow out her chest when her mother died. "I'm sorry," Lily said, and squeezed his hand with surprising strength for someone so small. Marcus looked down at this brave girl who understood without needing explanation, and something shifted in his chest. Some frozen thing beginning to thaw. They kept swaying. Two people who'd lost everything finding something unexpected in each other. Two broken hearts recognizing their reflection and choosing tentatively to hope again. The song played on, and neither of them spoke. But in that silence on a gymnasium dance floor surrounded by strangers, they began to heal. After the dance, they found seats at a table near the refreshments, and Marcus poured punch into paper cups, while Lily selected cookies with careful deliberation, choosing 2 chocolate chip and 1 sugar cookie decorated with pink frosting. Other girls drifted over, drawn by curiosity or genuine friendship, and suddenly Lily was part of conversations instead of watching them from the edges. Jennifer's friend asked about Lily's corsage, and Lily beamed, showing it off with pride. Another girl complimented her dress, and Lily thanked her without mentioning it. Came from a donation bin. For the first time in 3 years, Lily wasn't the outsider, wasn't the girl without a father, wasn't the orphan who made everyone uncomfortable. She was just Lily, with her dad, like everyone else, normal and included and belonging. Marcus watched her navigate the social dynamics with grace beyond her years, watched her laugh at someone's joke and offer her own shy observations. And he marveled at her resilience, at how this child who'd lost so much could still open herself to joy, could still hope, could still trust. During a quiet moment when the other girls had dispersed to dance or eat, Marcus leaned forward and asked, "Tell me about your mother. If you want to, I'd like to know." Lily's expression softened with a sadness that never fully left. "She died when I was 5. Cancer took a long time," she said quietly. "Sometimes I can't remember her face anymore, and that scares me. But I remember her voice, how she sang me to sleep, how she called me her little lily flower." Marcus's heart ached for this child carrying such enormous loss. She told him about Street, Mary's, about Sister Margaret, who was kind but strict, who made sure the children did their homework and said their prayers but rarely smiled. She told him about Sophie, her best friend and roommate, who read books constantly and dreamed of being adopted by a family with a big dog. Marcus listened with every particle of his attention, something he hadn't given anyone in 5 years, asking questions, remembering details, wanting to know everything about this remarkable child who'd wandered into his life with $20 and changed everything. The photographer called for father-daughter photos, and Marcus placed his hand on Lily's shoulder as they positioned themselves in front of a backdrop decorated with paper stars. Lily's smile was radiant, utterly transformed from the nervous girl who'd approached him in the park. And Marcus felt his own lips curve upward naturally, genuinely, for the first time in years. The flash went off, freezing them in that moment, capturing something neither of them would ever forget. A fragment of time when 2 lonely souls found each other and chose connection over isolation. After they stepped away from the backdrop, a teacher with kind eyes and graying hair approached Marcus, extending her hand. "Thank you so much for coming," she said warmly. "It means the world to Lily. You know the orphans from Street. Marys often have to miss these events. It's wonderful that she gets to participate this year." The teacher walked away smiling, completely unaware of what she'd just revealed, and Marcus felt his heart clench painfully in his chest. He'd known Lily was alone. She'd told him she lived at Street, Mary's, but hearing it confirmed so casually, hearing the word orphan applied to this bright, brave, beautiful girl as if it defined her, broke something open inside him. She wasn't an orphan, she was Lily. She was remarkable and kind and courageous. She was more than her circumstances, more than what she'd lost. When the teacher was out of earshot, Marcus knelt down to Lily's level, meeting her eyes directly. "Lily, would you like to get ice cream after this?" "My treat." Lily's eyes widened with surprise and confusion. "But that wasn't part of our deal," she said carefully, as if worried she was being tricked. Marcus shook his head. "I know it wasn't, but I'm having such a good time with you, and I'd like to extend our evening if you'd let me. Unless you need to get back to Street Mary's right away." Lily's face lit up like someone had switched on every light in a dark house. "I'd love that," she breathed. "I'd really, really love that." Marcus stood and offered his hand again, and Lily took it without hesitation, trusting him completely. And that trust felt more valuable than every dollar in his considerable fortune. They left the dance and walked 3 blocks to a small ice cream shop called Sweet Dreams, its neon sign flickering pink and blue against the darkening sky. Inside, the shop was nearly empty. Just an elderly couple sharing a sundae in the corner and a teenager behind the counter looking bored. Lily studied the flavors through the glass case with intense concentration, finally ordering a single scoop of chocolate in a cup, trying to be modest, trying not to take advantage of Marcus's generosity. Marcus saw right through her restraint and gently encouraged her. "Get whatever you want, Lily. This is my treat. Sprinkles, whipped cream, whatever makes you happy." Her face transformed with childish joy that made her look her actual age for the first time that evening, not the tiny adult she'd been forced to become. And she added rainbow sprinkles and a mountain of whipped cream, her eyes sparkling with delight. They slid into a red vinyl booth, and Lily ate her ice cream slowly, savoring every bite as if trying to make it last forever. "This has been the best night of my life," she said suddenly, looking up at Marcus with absolute sincerity. "Thank you for being so kind, for not making me feel weird or pitiful, and for just treating me like I matter." Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion so intense it physically hurt. "You do matter," he said roughly. "You matter tremendously." She studied him for a moment, then said softly, "You're a good dad. Or you were, to Emma. She was lucky to have you." The words nearly broke him. This orphan child telling him he'd been a good father when he'd spent 5 years believing he'd failed Emma by not protecting her, by not dying instead of her. He reached across the table and took Lily's free hand. "Your mother would be so proud of you," he said, his voice thick. "Proud of your courage, your kindness, your strength. You're remarkable, Lily." They talked as the ice cream melted, about memories that hurt but also healed, about loss that never disappeared but sometimes softened, about hope that felt dangerous but necessary, and in that small ice cream shop with its sticky tables and flickering lights, something profound happened. Two souls connected across the divide of age and circumstance, recognizing in each other the possibility of healing. As they walked back toward Mary's through streets lit by street lamps and the last traces of sunset, Marcus asked Lily about her dreams, what she wanted to be when she grew up, what she hoped for in her future. Lily didn't hesitate. "I want to be a teacher," she said with certainty, "because I want to help kids who feel alone, who feel different, who don't fit in. I want them to know someone sees them and cares." Marcus felt something crack open in his chest. This child who had so little, who'd been abandoned by fate and circumstance, still thought about helping others, still dreamed of giving rather than taking, still possessed a generosity of spirit that most adults had long since lost. "That's beautiful, Lily," he said quietly. "You're going to be an amazing teacher." They reached the steps of Mary's, and the building loomed above them, large and old with brick walls and narrow windows, stern and imposing in the evening light, institutional and impersonal, a place for children who belonged nowhere else. Lily turned to face Marcus and reached into her small purse, pulling out the crumpled $20 bill she'd given him yesterday. "You earned this," she said, holding it out. "You kept your promise. You were perfect." But Marcus shook his head and gently pushed her hand back. "No, Lily, you keep it. Save it for something important, something you really need." Lily's brow furrowed with confusion and protest. "But we had a deal. You can't just not take payment. That's not fair." Marcus crouched down so their eyes were level, so she could see the sincerity in his expression. "This evening wasn't about money," he said softly. "It was about something far more valuable. You trusted me, a stranger, with something precious, your hope, your dreams, your special night, and you let me be part of it. That's a gift I can never repay." He took her free hand in both of his. "Thank you, Lily. Thank you for finding me, for asking me, for giving me a reason to feel alive again." Lily stared at him with wide, confused eyes. "Why are you thanking me?" she whispered. "I'm the one who should be grateful. You're the one who did something amazing." Marcus smiled, a sad, tender smile. "Sometimes, Lily, the person who receives the gift isn't who you think it is." Marcus's voice grew thick with emotion, roughened by feelings he'd kept buried for half a decade. "I've been lost for a long time, Lily," he said. "Lost in grief, lost in guilt, lost in a life that stopped meaning anything when Emma died. I forgot what it felt like to be needed, to be a father, to matter to someone in a way that actually counts." He paused, collecting himself, making sure she understood. "You gave me that gift tonight. You didn't take from me. You gave to me. You reminded me what it feels like to be human, to care, to have a purpose beyond just existing." Lily's eyes filled with tears that caught the porch light and shimmered like stars. "Can we do this again?" she asked, her voice small and hopeful. Not the dance, but just spending time together. Maybe getting ice cream? Maybe just talking? Would that be okay? Marcus's heart soared and shattered simultaneously, soaring because nothing in the world would make him happier than seeing this remarkable child again. Shattered because he didn't know if it was possible, if Street Marys would allow it. If he had any right to insert himself into her life when he was still so broken, still so damaged by his own losses. I'd like that more than anything, he said honestly. But we'd need to make sure it's okay with Street Marys, with Sister Margaret, and the people who take care of you. We'd need to do this properly. The right way. Lily nodded, understanding more than most 8-year-olds would. Maturity born from loss, teaching her that adults had rules, that institutions had procedures, that wanting something wasn't enough to make it happen. Before she turned to go inside, before she climbed those imposing steps back into her temporary, impersonal life, she did something that took Marcus completely by surprise. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around his waist, hugging him with fierce intensity, with gratitude and affection, and trust all compressed into that small embrace. Marcus hugged her back, his arms encircling her thin shoulders, and for the first time in 5 years, since the morning they'd buried Emma and Sarah in the cold ground, he cried, tears streaming down his face silently, releasing grief and hope in equal measure. Mourning what he'd lost while embracing what he'd unexpectedly found. That night Marcus couldn't sleep, his mind racing with thoughts that wouldn't quiet, images that wouldn't fade. He paced through his mansion's empty rooms, past Emma's untouched bedroom with its toys and books frozen in time, through the cavernous living room with furniture no one sat on, across marble floors that echoed his footsteps back at him like accusations. He thought about Lily sleeping in an institutional dormitory with thin blankets and narrow beds, thought about Emma in her grave, surrounded by earth and silence, thought about the strange, impossible connection he'd felt tonight, like two pieces of different puzzles somehow fitting together perfectly. Sleep was impossible, so when dawn finally broke over the city, Marcus was already in his study, already making the call that would change everything. His lawyer, Richard Chen, Mrs. Chen's nephew and a friend of 30 years, answered on the third ring, his voice groggy with sleep. "Richard," Marcus said without preamble, "I need to know about becoming a foster parent, about adoption, about how a single man might be able to give a home to a child who needs one." The silence on the other end stretched long enough that Marcus thought the call had dropped. Then Richard's voice came back, filled with surprise, and something that sounded like hope. "Marcus, are you serious? You haven't shown interest in anything beyond work for 5 years. What's happened?" Marcus told him about Lily, about the dance, about the $20 and the courage it took to ask a stranger for help, and Richard listened without interrupting. When Marcus finished, Richard was quiet for a moment before saying, "It's possible, Marcus, absolutely possible, but it's a process. Background checks, home studies, interviews with social workers, psychological evaluations. It'll take months, and they'll examine every aspect of your life." Marcus didn't hesitate. "I don't care how long it takes or how invasive it is. Tell me what I need to do." Richard promised to send information by afternoon, but Marcus was already planning his next move. He needed to go back to Street Marys, needed to see Lily again, needed to be honest with her about who he really was, about his wealth, about his intentions, about the hope that had taken root in his chest and refused to be ignored. Marcus arrived at Street Marys the following Saturday morning, his heart pounding as he climbed the stone steps and pressed the doorbell beside the heavy wooden door. A young nun answered and led him through hallways that smelled of floor polish and institutional cooking to an office where Sister Margaret sat behind a desk, stacked with files and paperwork. She was a woman in her 60s, weathered by decades of caring for children the world had forgotten. Her face lined with wisdom and compassion, earned through witnessing countless stories of loss and occasional redemption. Marcus stood before her desk and introduced himself formally. "I'm Marcus Crawford, and I'm here to talk to you about Lily Henderson." He saw the flicker of recognition in Sister Margaret's eyes, the slight widening that told him she knew exactly who he was, had read about him in newspapers, knew about the billionaire philanthropist whose wife and daughter had died 5 years ago, whose grief had become public knowledge. "Please sit, Mr. Crawford," she said, her voice kind but measured. "And tell me what brings you to Street Mary's." Marcus sat and spoke from his heart, told her about the dance, about Lily's $20 and impossible courage, about how this small girl had reminded him what it meant to live, to hope, to love, to have a purpose beyond merely existing. He asked about visiting Lily, about beginning the process of fostering her, about the possibility of giving her a home. Sister Margaret listened without interrupting, her sharp eyes never leaving his face, evaluating every word, every expression, every tremor in his voice. When he finished, she leaned back in her chair and folded her hands. "Mr. Crawford, I've been running Street Mary's for 23 years, she said quietly. "I've seen wealthy people before who think they can swoop in and save a child on a whim, who want to feel good about themselves without understanding the reality of what damaged children need. And I've watched those same people abandon those children when the reality gets hard, when the gratitude isn't immediate, when the healing takes years instead of weeks." She paused, letting her words settle. "Tell me why, Lily. Why now? Why should I trust you with her heart?" Marcus met her gaze steadily. "Because she already trusted me with hers, and I won't betray that." Sister Margaret studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Supervised visits," she said. "You can see her here. Spend time with her. Prove your commitment. But Mr. Crawford, if you hurt that child, if you disappoint her, you'll answer to me and to God." Marcus began visiting Lily every Saturday at 10 in the morning, arriving with the reliability of sunrise, never late, never making excuses, proving through consistency what words alone couldn't convey. At first they met in Street Mary's common room under Sister Margaret's watchful eye, a space with worn furniture and toys missing pieces, where other children watched with curiosity and envy as this well-dressed man sat on the floor with Lily playing board games with genuine enthusiasm. They played checkers and sorry and go fish. And Marcus discovered Lily was fiercely competitive, strategic beyond her years, gracious in victory and determined in defeat. They read books together, Marcus doing funny voices that made Lily laugh so hard she snorted, which made them both laugh harder. They talked about their weeks, Lily sharing stories about school, about a math test she'd aced, about a disagreement with Jennifer that had resolved peacefully, about Sophie's obsession with a book series about dragons. Marcus shared carefully edited versions of his life, his work helping people, his beautiful old house, slowly revealing more about himself, without overwhelming her with the magnitude of his wealth. After a month of supervised visits, Sister Margaret granted permission for outings, and Marcus planned each one with meticulous care. They went to Riverside Park, where they'd first met, to the Natural History Museum, where Lily stood transfixed before the dinosaur skeletons, to quiet lunches at modest restaurants where they talked about everything and nothing. Marcus was careful not to shower her with extravagant gifts or money, understanding instinctively that what Lily needed wasn't material wealth, but consistent presence, reliable affection, someone who showed up and stayed. But he made sure each outing was meaningful, special, creating memories that would anchor her sense of being valued. Lily blossomed under his attention like a plant finally given sunlight after years in shadow. Her teachers reported her grades improving, her participation in class increasing, her confidence growing visibly week by week. She smiled more, laughed easier, walked taller through Street Mary's hallways. The other children noticed, whispered about Lily's rich visitor, about how lucky she was. Sophie was genuinely happy for her best friend, but couldn't help the jealousy that gnawed at her, the unfairness that Lily got a Marcus Crawford while Sophie got nothing, nobody, just more weeks in the orphanage, watching her friend transform into someone with hope, with a future, with someone who cared. 3 months after the father-daughter dance, Marcus officially submitted his application to foster Lily Henderson. And the process that followed was more exhaustive than any business deal he'd ever negotiated. Social workers arrived at his mansion unannounced, walking through rooms, examining Emma's preserved bedroom with solemn faces, questioning Mrs. Chen and Thomas and the gardener, about Marcus's character, his stability, his fitness to parent a traumatized child. They reviewed his finances with microscopic attention, not concerned about his ability to provide materially, but worried about the vast gulf between his world and Lily's, whether he could truly relate to a child from poverty, whether wealth would become a barrier instead of a bridge. They requested his mental health records, sat with his therapist, Dr. Williams, for hours discussing his grief journey, his progress, his setbacks, reading through 5 years of therapy notes, documenting his descent into despair and his recent tentative climb back toward hope. There were moments, long, sleepless nights, when Marcus feared rejection. Imagine the social worker's voice saying he was too damaged, too grieving, too broken to take responsibility for another fragile heart. But Dr. Williams advocated passionately, testifying that Lily had accomplished what years of therapy couldn't, had given Marcus a reason to heal, to engage, and to live. Mrs. Chen spoke through tears about watching Marcus transform from a ghost to a man again, about how he smiled now, how he had purpose, and most importantly, Lily herself sat with the social worker and spoke with heartbreaking honesty about how Marcus made her feel safe, seen, loved, how he listened to her stories and remembered details and showed up every single Saturday without fail. How he was the first person since her mother died who made her feel like she mattered. The social worker, a stern woman named Patricia who'd seen every manipulation and false promise imaginable, found herself moved to tears. Finally, after what felt like an eternity compressed into 3 months, Marcus received the call. He was approved. Lily could come live with him on a trial foster basis. 6 months to prove the placement would work. When Marcus told Lily the next Saturday, kneeling in the common room while she processed his words, she cried tears of pure joy and disbelief. "Someone wants me," she whispered. "Someone actually chose me." Marcus pulled her into his arms, his own tears falling freely. "I chose you, Lily," he said, "and I'll keep choosing you every single day for the rest of my life." The day Lily moved into Marcus's mansion, she stood in the grand foyer with her single small suitcase containing everything she owned, 3 years of life compressed into worn clothes and a few treasured possessions, and stared in absolute awe at marble floors that reflected light like water, crystal chandeliers that scattered rainbows across walls, a sweeping staircase that belonged in fairy tales. Marcus saw her shock, the way she seemed to shrink in the face of such overwhelming opulence, and he knelt down immediately, taking her trembling hands in his. "This is your home now, Lily," he said gently. "You don't have to be scared or intimidated. This is just a building, just walls and floors. What makes it home is that you're here." Mrs. Chen appeared with a plate of homemade chocolate chip cookies still warm from the oven, welcoming Lily with grandmother warmth that made the mansion feel less imposing. Marcus led Lily upstairs to her room, not Emma's preserved shrine but a new space they decorated together during supervised visits at furniture stores. And Lily gasped when she saw it, a window seat overlooking the garden, a bookshelf already filling with books they'd chosen together, a desk for homework with drawers full of supplies, and a bed with a fluffy purple comforter, because purple was her favorite color. Lily sat on the bed and bounced slightly, testing its softness, hardly believing anything this comfortable could be hers. That night Marcus tucked her in, pulling the covers up to her chin, something he hadn't done since Emma. And the familiar motion broke and healed him simultaneously. Lily looked up at him with eyes full of love and uncertainty. "Can I call you Dad?" she whispered. "Or is that not allowed yet?" Marcus's voice broke completely as he said, "Yes, I'd be honored. Nothing would make me happier." She smiled, that radiant smile that had captured his heart in a park 3 months ago. "I love you, Dad," she said. "I'm so glad I found you on that bench." Marcus bent down and kissed her forehead. "I'm glad too, sweetheart. You saved me when I didn't even know I needed saving." When I'd forgotten how to hope, Lily fell asleep within minutes, safe and loved and home for the first time in 3 years, while Marcus sat in the hallway outside her room with his back against the wall, overwhelmed with gratitude and purpose, finally understanding that grief and joy could coexist. that honoring Emma's memory meant living fully, meant opening his heart again, meant becoming the father this brave girl needed. 1 year later, on a warm Saturday afternoon, Marcus and Lily returned to Riverside Park and sat on the same bench where their story began. The crumpled $20 bill now sat framed in Marcus's study, a reminder of the day courage and desperation and grace collided. Lily was officially his daughter now, the adoption finalized 2 months ago in a courtroom where Lily had stood before the judge and declared with absolute certainty that Marcus Crawford was her dad and she was his daughter, and nothing would ever change that. She called him Dad naturally now, without hesitation or uncertainty, and Marcus had started a foundation in Emma's name helping orphans and foster children. With Lily volunteering beside him, using her story to give other kids hope. They still had hard days, grief didn't disappear and loss didn't vanish, but they faced those days together as a family, holding each other through the darkness and celebrating the light. Marcus looked at his daughter, watching her feed breadcrumbs to pigeons with the same generous spirit she'd always possessed, and marveled at the mysterious mathematics of grace, how a little girl with $20 and impossible courage had approached a broken stranger and saved them both. She hadn't known she was healing a billionaire's shattered soul, and he hadn't known he was about to gain his whole world. But that's how miracles work. Quietly, in moments of brave vulnerability. In the space between two broken hearts, choosing to hope again, choosing to trust again, choosing to love again, despite every reason not to.